Yeah, looks like it's fine. Okay, go back.
Okay. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning for our MPW webinar series. So today's webinar will be an economics masterclass delivered today by Ponniah from MPW Cambridge, and we well, Ben has an assistant today in that of Susanna De Beer, who is our international vice principal at MPW Cambridge as well. So as usual, please could I ask that you keep your mic on mute. You will have the opportunity to ask us questions throughout the session and we will answer them at the end. There is also a new raise your hand button as well. So if we do see that, do raise your hands. We assume it's a question. We will try and answer it throughout the session, but as I said, we will definitely answer the questions at the end. So this is also being recorded and we will send the recording at the end of the day today. So I'll hand over to Ben and Susanna. Thank you.
So good morning and welcome everybody. We are so delighted to have you here from our Cambridge side. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susanna De Beer and Ben is one of our outstanding economics teachers. So he's going to take us through an overview of the course this morning, and we're also going to look at some university requirements and careers that you can do in economics. So Ben, it is said that economics is one of the most interesting and exciting subjects or fields that you can study. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've been hooked on economics since the very beginning. So I remember vividly at the age of 15, which is now 20 years ago, I remember going for a careers event at my school for sixth form, and some students showed me the supply and demand model, which is a sort of core feature of the A-level syllabus, and they used it to explain how prices change in different markets, and they said that this model can be applied to any market. And I was just I thought, wow, what it can, so it has that power, that sort of predictive and explanatory power. It can explain any market, why the prices go up or down. And so I thought, well, this is clearly an interesting subject if it can explain that and predict that. So since then, I've just been delving deeper and deeper into economics, and it's not disappointed.
Very good. So you will give us an overview of what you study at A-level economics, as well as some skills and some of the topics that you are going to study. So Ben, all over to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Susanna. Okay, so I'm going to provide a brief overview of the syllabus, but I thought it should be quite interactive because that's how lessons are. For me, it's good to hear students' ideas and get them to really engage with the material. So economics is a very good subject for discussions because the questions it's not clear cut. It's not the answer 6. There's a lot of evaluation, a lot of debate in the areas. So that we'll talk about. So I'll put some questions up, and hopefully we can get a few people sending in their answers, maybe typing in their answers, and then we can see where we go from there. So broadly speaking, economics is divided into 2 areas. So it's divided into something called microeconomics and something called macroeconomics. So microeconomics is the left-hand side of this table. So themes 1 and 3. So this looks at individuals, why people make certain decisions, companies, why companies make certain decisions, and individual governments. So like the UK government, how they react to the coronavirus, for example, would be the kind of topic we'd look at. So we look at individuals, companies, and specific markets. So micro means small. We're kind of zooming in on the economy and getting an idea of particular markets. And then macroeconomics is zooming out and sort of looking at the whole economy and thinking about concepts such as interest rates, exchange rates, trade, and those sorts of ideas, developing economies versus developed economies. And so that's sort of theme 2 and 4, the right-hand side of the table. So microeconomics on the left and macroeconomics on the right. So what I thought we'd do is just look through some key questions that we cover in economics, and I'll put them to you. and see if you've got some thoughts, some answers, and then we can have a little discussion on that. So let's make a start on that. I think probably before we look at the questions, it would be useful just to talk about what is economics. So economics is often defined in terms of the basic economic problem. So what this means is that we have limited resources. So we've got limited land, limited workers, labor, limited capital machinery, limited number of sort of entrepreneurs. So we've got limited resources or factors of production, but we've got unlimited wants. So we want more. We want to stretch those resources. So how do we match those two? So how do we make decisions to use our resources most effectively? And we'll talk a bit more about that later. So that is what economics is in a very sort of brief definition related to the basic economic problem. So we'll look at some questions now. So so economics will help you answer the following types of question. So question one, at the moment, why is the price of oil so low? Or why is the price of oil so low now? Does anyone have an answer, or would anyone like to put forward an answer? If not, I can obviously explain it, but let's see if anyone's willing to have a go. Okay, I've got a couple of answers down here. You can keep sending them in if you like. So one of them is coronavirus. Yes, I think that's definitely an impact. So if we think about, and also nobody wants to buy oil. Yeah, that's linked to coronavirus, isn't it? So if there's no one wanting to buy oil because we're kind of stuck in our houses, then the demand for oil is low. So that's a really good answer. So, and if the demand for oil is low, that means the price is low. If you think about products which have high prices, it's people want to buy them, they're willing to pay a high price for them. So this is not the case for oil. It usually is, but people, as I said, are not driving around as much. So good. So there's the demand side element. Okay, we've got some other answers. Yeah, COVID-19, not much transport over the world, so no need for oil. Absolutely good. You've just explained what I said, so very good. Good answer. Most gas petroleum has excess stock in the refinery. Brilliant. Okay, so now that's from Julian. We have that there's now excess supply as well. So there's a lack of demand and there's too much supply. And so when you have too much supply, that causes the price to go down. You can think about it like this, that when we have a lot of something like air or sunshine, that it's very low cost. In fact, it's free. Whereas if we think about things that are relatively rare, there's not very much of it. Diamonds, gold, they are relatively high in price. But at the same time, it very much depends. It's not just the supply side, it depends on the demand side as well. So oil, which is usually quite high in price, is driven down really low now by a lack of demand and very high supply. So and we've got another answer that there are no planes flying. So planes, of course, need fuel. And so that's another driver of the lack of demand and therefore lots of supply as well. Excellent. Yeah. So good. I think we've covered that question pretty well. I'm very pleased with those answers. So we got there's too much supply and a lack of demand, which is driving the price of oil low. That's the kind of question we'll look at. And as I said earlier, this model of supply and demand can be applied to any market you can think of, anywhere where there are buyers and sellers and products. This model will work. If there's if there's very high demand, the price goes up. If there's a lack of supply, there's not enough supply, the price will also go up. And vice versa, like we've just spoken about with oil. So, and we teach the students the models, the theories, and how that works. So, but that's the basic idea of it. So, and we look at graphs and sort of analyze that, changes in equilibria, etc. But I won't go into that now. Let's look at another question. Okay. So, if there was no government, so there was just buyers and sellers, selling products, buying products in a marketplace. What problems might there be? So this is part of theme 1 as well. We've talked about how markets would work. Buyers and sellers come together, and that's an efficient allocation of resources rather than, let's say, the government just deciding how to produce everything. We've found in the past that when economies get the government to choose what's produced and how much to produce completely, with no sort of private enterprise, there's usually, we run out of stuff. We run out of resources quite quickly. Not enough is produced. So in this case, though, so we've said why markets are good. They allocate resources effectively. But then what might be some problems if there is no government? So what are some thoughts there? Have a think for a bit and send us in your answers. What problems might there be? Okay, good. I'm seeing no regulation, so no sort of rules, no laws. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. Yeah, exactly. I've got another answer here. There'll be no rules for trade. Yes, exactly. So the quality of products might not be looked into. Yeah, cartel will form. So yeah, okay. So that there might be groups of companies forming and then just setting any price that they want, and there's no regulation that there's no government to intervene, and so prices might just go very high. We might get monopolies forming as well. Yeah, that's a very good answer from Julian again. Good. So we're getting some of the ideas here, and some of the concepts, other concepts we cover are certain products will be overconsumed if there's no government, and certain products will be underconsumed. So there'll be too much consumption. So if we imagine there's no rules and regulation on cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, then there'll be overconsumption of these products, which we call demerit goods. So goods that are not good for society, which will cause a cost on the healthcare system. And so therefore the government intervenes. That's the last part of theme 1. The government will intervene and put a tax in place to try and solve that problem. Similarly, if there's just the private sector and no public sector, there would be underconsumption of healthcare and education. There would just be private schools, private hospitals, and most of the people wouldn't be able to afford education and healthcare. And so therefore the government steps in and subsidizes these and provides these for free. And we look at that and see what are the benefits of that and what are the costs of that. Okay, great. And let's move on to another type of question that we might see. There are 5 of these, just in case you're wondering. So, okay, here we go. So moving on to theme 3, so looking at businesses and profits. What do the most profitable firms in the world have in common? So what is a sort of golden theme, a core thread that links all of the profitable firms? What do they share? Have a think about that. Yeah, okay, so we've already got an answer. That's great. They produce things that people really want. Absolutely, good. So there's high demand for the products. People want to buy these products. So if we think about certainly one of the most profitable companies, I don't know if it's the most anymore because Amazon is doing very well as well. But Apple was reportedly the most profitable company relatively recently. And of course, Apple produces products that many people want. Laptops, phones, etc. So good. So there's high demand for these products, which pushes up the price, which pushes up the profits. So yeah, absolutely. Demand by people such as food, oil, technology. Great. Okay, so there's some examples here. Food, oil, technology are examples of products which are very very profitable industries. Okay. And yes, of course, now Amazon is doing particularly well because people are sitting inside and ordering things to be delivered to their homes. So that is, I myself have done that recently. So that is very much a good answer as well. So yeah, and we can delve a bit deeper into that. So if we think about oil and technology and food companies, something that they share is high barriers to entry. So if I wanted to start my own oil company, I couldn't just sort of put a hat on and start digging. There's a lot of barriers to entry. There's lots of regulations that need to be, lots of paperwork, lots of skills, lots of machinery. Yeah, and so basically those industries are very hard to enter. Whereas if I wanted to start up my own YouTube channel, for example, the barriers to entry are very small. I've already got a laptop, and it's very easy to upload videos to YouTube. So that the barriers to entry there are relatively low. Whereas for for very profitable industries. If you think about Apple, for example, and there's the software, there's the sort of hardware, the technology, all of those are very costly, and so high barriers to entry mean that not many firms can enter, and so it's those firms are likely to remain profitable. So that's that question. We'll move on to another one. So yeah, good. Yeah, so high startup costs, exactly. So that's a good explanation of it. It's very costly to start up for these businesses, and yeah, so not many people can do that. You don't see very many phone companies. You do see a few, but not thousands. Okay, why do some people get paid more than others when they are doing the same job? So let's consider an investment manager, for example. So why would they get? Why is there some variation within that role? And any job. I've just given that as an example. So have a think about that. Okay, there's a good answer here. Good thought. It depends on which country we're in. So different countries. So we could think about taxes. So some countries have lower tax, and so you get to keep more of your money. Yeah, that's it. So which country is a good answer. It depends on the type of investment. And so if it's what's the investment that's happening. Yeah, good. It also depends on the work experience. Yes, so yeah, if someone's got a lot more work experience and therefore skills, then they are more likely to be more productive and earn the company more money. So yeah, that's a really good answer. Okay, so yeah, the way we look at this, it's a bit like when we're talking about the price of oil. It's again, we can boil economics down to supply and demand. There's more to it than that, but many of the concepts do link back to that. So if we think about I don't know how many football fans there are, but we think about Lionel Messi. So many argue that he's the best footballer of all time, not just now, but of all time. And so why does he get paid so much? If we just think about that one example, well, there's only one person like him. He's got such a high skill set. So there's a very limited supply of people who can do what he does at that level. So very high skill, very limited supply. What does that link to? You know, oil prices go up when there's a lack of supply. Wages go up when there's a lack of supply of people who can do that job. And also he's extremely productive in terms of scoring goals. So there's very high demand for him. So companies are willing to bid, and the demand for him is very high. So lack of supply, high demand, that's going to push up the price of him effectively, or the wage that he can earn. So again, we can link it to pretty much any market, as I said, not just the market for goods and services, but the market for labor as well. So got some more answers here. Depends on your reputation within the industry. Absolutely. So if you're known for being particularly successful, or if you've been particularly bad to people, again, you might lose your job, and so that will affect your wages. So it's your people skills as well, not just your sort of raw skill, raw talent, because we have to work in teams and get along with people as well. So that's an interesting point. One more question to think about before we move on from this section. Okay, so we've mostly considered micro questions, you may have noticed. So the sort of left-hand side. So I thought we'd finish with a macro question, a very broad question, again, which your students, my students would be able to answer having completed this course. So why do some economies grow while others shrink? Okay, so pretty big fundamental question, but can we think of some reasons behind this? So why do some economies grow while others shrink? Just give you a bit of time to think about that. This question might have stumped everyone. Yeah, it is a difficult question, I think. Yeah, okay, we've got one person willing to have a go. Great. So society and technology keep developing. Yes. Okay. So if we think about so that's a good way to break down the problem. So which economies are the most successful? Which are the biggest economies? The US economy is the biggest economy. Depending on how we measure it, China is a very large economy as well. So if we think about those two very different economies, why are they doing so well? at least in the past. We'll have to wait and see what happens now with COVID-19. So the technology of the United States is arguably the best in the world. China's technology is also very good as well. And one of the reasons China has grown so fast is export-led growth. And so they're selling, they're sort of manufacturers of the world. Made in China is well known to everyone. And so that huge export-led growth has meant lots of money flowing into China, and therefore China is able to grow by basically producing for the world, manufacturing for the world. So, we've got another suggestion here. So political decisions, that's a really good point. So one of the good things about economics is that it ties together many different subjects. So particularly maths and economics go very well, but also politics and economics go well, psychology and economics go well, history and economics go well. Given the broad nature of it, trying to use our resources in the best possible way, it connects with many different subjects. So politics is really important. If you have political leaders, and this gets into theme 4, where we look at sort of developing economies. If you have political leaders who are perhaps dictators and more self-serving and not trying to help the people of the country, then we're going to see large poverty, and we do unfortunately see this in many sub-Saharan African countries, for example. So the politics is a very big factor behind why some economies grow and some economies shrink. Good. We'll come back to that one, because that question, I'm actually going to teach you a model that that my students will cover. So we'll look at that later, and then we might have some more answers to that question. We've got one more point. Some economies thrive on free trade and free markets. That's a really good point. So it depends on whether the economy, how free is the economy? So is there free trade, or are there lots of tariffs in place? And that's another popular discussion which we can talk about as well, about China versus the United States, the sort of Donald Trump suggesting America first and putting tariffs on China. And so all those decisions will definitely have an impact on economic growth, as well as the science, technology and research. So and we know America in particular, in addition, of course, the UK, Oxford and Cambridge, but America has some of the finest universities as well. So that's another reason behind the technology and science. Okay, great. We'll move on from those questions, and we'll start looking at the skills that you'll learn if you study economics. So studying economics, this is from the exam board. So there's AO1, AO2, if you look in the sort of top left-hand corner. And so that shows that basically you need to have knowledge. So you need to know the key terms. What is economics, to be able to define it. And then AO2 is being able to apply that knowledge. So thinking about, okay, how does the supply and demand model link to the demand for Apple products, or how does it link to the demand for flights? And we're seeing, of course, companies like Netflix are doing very well at the moment, Amazon doing very well at the moment, but British Airways not doing very well at the moment, unsurprisingly. So the demand is high for products which are internet-based, for some of them Zoom, for example, conferencing software, and the demand is low for transportation at the moment. So it's about having the knowledge and applying it. And I just thought I'd show you some of the models that we cover, just so you can see that, as I said, maths and economics do go very well together. So if you see the left hand under the simple model, so this is one of the first models we look at. We simplify. A model is essentially a simplification of reality. So we try to make the world as simple as possible, because it is a complex place. But from these simple models, we can derive lots of really interesting sort of results from them, and it can help us analyze and consider what's happening in the real world, as we'll see later. So this model looks at, we assume that the economy, there's a particular economy which only makes two products. So there's fruit and wheat. And let's say we start at point J. So that's how much wheat is being produced. And then point G is how much fruit is being produced. And then what we have then is we move from point J to K. So let's say the economy is going to produce, they decide to produce more wheat. And what's going to be the impact on fruit? And the impact on fruit is that we're going to have a fall. So it's going to fall from G to F. So that is an example, a very simple example of how we can see that a decision made by a country to produce more of one thing, given that there's limited resources, means they have to sacrifice fruit. So producing more wheat means sacrificing fruit. So that is that's a very simple idea. It also shows the idea of limited resources, because this curve here from H to L, that just shows that there's not infinite fruit and wheat. That's the limited amount that can be produced. And so that's the kind of very simple model that we start off with, and we can derive lots of interesting ideas about what should be produced, how should the time be best used, how can our limited resources be best used. And then we get in the second year, we come to more complicated models like this model here, which is a monopoly graph, which shows the profit maximizing quantity and price. And so I won't go into the details of that. That takes a very long time to go through where we get all of that from. But essentially, students will be able to discuss profit maximization of firms, how much they need to charge to maximize their profits, how much they need to sell to maximize their profits. So very important for businesses and business economics. And then, yeah, we bring together all of these sorts of models, and we can have some robust explanations of how households behave. So if we think about households, so how households save, what jobs people do, where people live, all of those sorts of questions we can answer using economics, what people buy. And then we can also think about firms, so what decisions firms make. So if we think about the basic economic problem, that might be the easiest way to think about how we can apply it to the real world. So if we think about household, the limited resources of households is going to be, we could say, income. And so they have to decide, okay, where are they going to live? What schools are they going to send their children to? And what car should they have? Yeah, what house should they buy, etc. What size house? And so those are the kinds of economics of the household decisions that have to be made with limited resources. If there wasn't limited resources, households could have, you know, they could buy everything, and and they don't have to make any choices. But choices come from having limited resources. So the choices firms have to make are, what products should we produce? Should we stop producing some? Some products aren't doing particularly well. Should we focus on a few products or make many products? And so those kind of decisions. Who should we employ? So when hiring workers, who's the best person to do this job? So that's another decision. They've got two candidates. They have to try and choose the best one for the job. So those are some of the decisions firms have to make with their limited resources. They can only afford to hire one of those workers. Governments have choices to make as well. They've of course got limited money. And how are they going to spend? How much are they going to spend on education? How much are they going to spend on healthcare? How much are they going to spend on defence? And so governments have to think about what's the optimal decision in that regard. And then financial institutions, what investments to make, and then the one below that, it's sort of covered by something of mine, but yeah, I can't see that one, unfortunately. But you get the idea of the basic economic problem. And how that can be applied to many different areas and many different groups of people. So we're basically trying to make sense of the real world, and economics teaches you the skills to understand various different groups of people and organizations. And then we move on to the sort of deeper skills. So we try and analyze particular issues, so explain how things work. But then we also evaluate them, because, as I said, there's no, the answer isn't just 6. In economics, it's like we have deep sort of debates which need to happen. So there's analysis, which is explaining your arguments. So you put forward, okay, a classic one that's happened recently is, should the UK stay in the European Union? So Remain versus Brexit. So I've put forward several dilemmas here. So we've got Remain versus Brexit, free trade versus protectionism, high tax versus low tax for countries, and capitalism versus communism. So these are the kinds of debates that students will have in class, and it's very interesting that the students I've taught have often come to the class with a particular view, but then when they really think about it, they sometimes change their view or become stronger in their view, but they have the tools to justify why they've made those choices. So that is those sorts of deeper skills require explaining some of the arguments. Why should a country have low tax versus high tax? And then thinking, what are the weaknesses? That's evaluation. What are some of the weaknesses of the arguments? So perhaps we could consider one of these now. I think maybe the high tax versus low tax one might be one of the easiest ones for people to think about. So there are some countries which have very low tax. Saudi Arabia, for example, very low tax. Some countries which have very high tax. Norway, for example. So shall we have a little think about that? So would anyone like to put forward an argument for why it's good to have high tax and why it's good to have low tax? So we can have sort of both sides. So basically one person arguing for high tax and one person arguing for low tax. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so to write something down. Okay, we've already got a very good answer here. Thank you. So if you have high tax, you should have more money to provide public services. Yeah, that's a very good. Oops, excuse me. Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's what we can see from this this graph. That some of the happiest countries in the world have high taxes, and they provide very high quality education, healthcare, public services, and therefore the citizens of the country are happier overall. So this is quite a controversial topic, as you can imagine. So in economics, we do get some quite heated debates. Some people are very much no, low tax is the best way, and some people are no, high tax is the best way, and we get some really nice discussions. And of course, these kind of skills and discussions are very much useful in the workplace when you have to negotiate and discuss various ideas. And so those are some other skills that come about from studying economics when we have debates. It's not just in sort of writing that they have to write essays and draw graphs to explain things. It's also we have sort of real world discussions as well. So yeah, okay, so high tax, that's sort of agreeing with this graph here. Can anyone provide an argument for low tax? So why might low taxation be a good thing for a country? What's the benefit of having low taxation? Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, there's so we've got two nice arguments here. So low tax means there's more money to spend. So yeah, I wouldn't be very upset if the taxes went down. I'd have more disposable income and I could buy more things. And so yeah, this is why many people do move to low tax countries or tax havens. More competitive for trade, yes. So if there's fewer import taxes or tariffs, then it makes trade cheaper and therefore imports cheaper. And so that could improve the standard of living if you can buy things more cheaply or better value. So yeah, great. So those are the kinds of debates, some of the examples of debates we would have in economics classes. Yeah, okay, and we've got a really nice evaluation point here. So it's not totally true that high taxes are necessarily good and make for happy countries, because the high taxes might just go into the government. The government might just take the tax revenue and spend it on themselves. So and not the people of the country. So it depends again on the quality of the government and how sort of corrupt the government is. So yeah, it's a complex problem. There are many things to think about. So good. Yeah. So we're having quite a nice debate there, but we need to move on. So okay. So I'll just check how we're doing for. Yeah, we're doing okay for time. So I wanted to teach you an economic model. As you can see, I've had to draw this myself because I didn't want to teach you the full thing because we've only got a few minutes to do this. So I've got a very simplified version of something called the circular flow of income. So I asked the question earlier, and I got some answers, but I think it was quite a difficult question to answer. Why do some economies grow and some economies shrink? And this model aims to explain that, and it's called the circular flow of income, but I've obviously simplified it here. So this is trying to explain why GDP, the total value of goods and services that's produced in an economy, why does that change over time? Why does that go up or down? And we can think about it like water. So what's going on here is the three things at the top are taps which pour water into a bucket. So this is a bucket here, but the bucket also has three holes at the bottom, which are called leakages or withdrawals. And so basically, if you just think about this without any economics in it, if there's more money flowing, if there's more water flowing in to the bucket than there's leaking out, then the level of water will rise. And if there's more money leaking out of the bottom of the bucket than is coming in at the top, then the level of GDP will fall. So so if the GDP rises, the gross domestic product rises, then we've got economic growth. If the GDP falls, then we've got the economy is shrinking. So if we now think about this in terms of applying economics to it, so there are three things called injections which will lead to economic growth. So there's investment, government spending, and exports. Those are the three taps at the top which are pouring water into this bucket. But there are also three things that will cause the economy to shrink if these go up perhaps too quickly. So if there's very high savings, very high taxes, very high imports, all of these are money not being spent in the economy. So they're either being put in the bank and not flowing around the economy. They're either being taxed by the government and therefore not being spent immediately, or they're being spent abroad in other countries. So that's flowing out of our country and into another country, often China. So we can see, so we can look at this now with a bit more sort of theory behind it. So the injections, as I said, are investment plus government spending and export. So so if a company spends money on capital, on machinery, that's going to be more money coming into the economy. If the government spends more money building a hospital, that's more money coming into the economy. If we export products, as we said, China grew hugely and is still growing due to export-led growth. And so those are three things which will cause growth. If we look at the withdrawals or leakages from the bottom of the bucket, these are things that will lead to the growth falling. So there's very high savings, people not spending money, taxes being very high, and high levels of imports, money flowing to another country. So we can come up with a basic idea here. And so in answer to this question, using this very simple model, we can see that if injections, the top three, are bigger than the bottom three, the withdrawals or leakages, then GDP rises. Yep. So the economy is going to grow. And then we can come up with another very simple equation. If they're equal, if you imagine the water flowing in is the same as the water flowing out, then the economy is going to stay the same. The GDP is going to remain constant. And then if we have the situation where the withdrawals, the leakages, are more than the injections, so the savings, taxes, and imports are more than the investment, government spending, and exports, then the GDP will fall. And so that is essentially how that's a very simple explanation of why GDP goes up and down, why the economy grows, why it shrinks. Of course, this is like the first model we cover in macro. We go through more complicated models, but I thought I'd share with you, and it looks a little bit different to this when we draw it for an exam. But this, I thought, hopefully makes sense. So let's have a think about a particular question. So with COVID-19, what is likely to happen to investment, exports, and savings? So have a think about this. Given coronavirus, what is likely to happen to investment, exports, and savings? So those are three different parts of this model. You can pick one or try all three. I'll offer something while we're waiting for some answers. So, okay, we've got an answer. So investments will be made in technologies that keep social distancing to Amazon. Okay, yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, so we've got another answer. Investment and exports are going to be down. Savings up. Okay, yeah, good. So in the interest of time, we'll look at that example. So investments and exports are down. Yes, absolutely. Firms have a lack of confidence. They're less likely to expand and spend money. Exports are down because trade is down. We discussed earlier that aeroplanes aren't. There's very little trade going on, and savings are likely to go up. That's a very good answer. Thank you. So savings are likely to go up because confidence is down. People are now saving in case they lose their job, for example. And so with that in mind, what's going to happen to GDP if we have investment and exports down and savings up? Well, if we look at the model, it means we've got less coming in at the top, less investment from the investment tap, fewer exports from the export tap. So that those are not, we're not getting as much money flowing in from those injections, and we're having more money flowing out from the savings. So the GDP level will fall with that example. Great. So someone's just said that. So GDP will fall. Investment can be good if you choose technology Zoom. Yeah. Okay. Saving may not go up as there is a possibility of job loss. Yeah. So you're good. So there's some evaluation here that savings might not go up. People may need to keep spending money because they obviously have to live as well. So, and then the final point we can think about is what can be done to solve this problem. And just in the interest of time, I'll just sort of talk through these rather than keeping the questions going. We'll do some more questions later. So the government could spend more money, which we're seeing across many countries. The government is spending money, particularly in the UK now, to try and minimize the damage of this virus and minimize the potential recession that we have where GDP really falls down. And so if the government is spending lots of money, what's that doing? That's an injection. So that should hopefully keep the water or GDP level rising and stop GDP falling too much, and therefore protecting people's jobs and livelihoods to an extent. So that is a possible solution. But there's a lot of debate around what the government should do. How should the government spend their money? And that's what we cover in economics. We think about those difficult questions. Okay. So so hopefully you've seen that with economics, it provides the tools and skills to understand what's going on in the world. So you've obviously, I hope you've all heard of the Economist magazine. It's not just for economists; it's for anyone interested in what's going on in the world. So there are various issues on the front covers of these Economist magazines. So with the tools and skills you learn, you can apply, as we said, supply and demand. Or just any of the other sort of discussion-based skills like analysis and evaluation to any of the sort of issues that are covered in The Economist. So this it doesn't mean you necessarily need to go and study economics at university. These skills are obviously useful if you go for any job interview and discuss what's happening in the news. If you have some knowledge of economics, you'll really be able to shine through from other candidates who may not have studied economics, because you can really analyze and evaluate what's happening in the world with very sort of precise tools which economics teaches. So it helps understand the world economy, and as I said, it's just a subject for life. You never stop learning about it, and so I can't sort of praise it enough, really. So talking about the difference between, this is often a question that comes up, what is the difference between economics and business studies? So if you see the picture from earlier on, which is economics is trying to explain the complex sort of interactions between households, firms, governments, the rest of the world. That was the thing I couldn't see before. Okay, yeah. So the rest of the world, and yeah, so we're looking at international trade, and we're thinking about always linking it back to the basic economic problem. So households, governments, firms or companies, rest of the world, we all have limited resources, and how do we choose to use those resources in the most efficient way? So that is what economics looks at and tries to explain what's happening in the world economy. So why is there growth in this country? Why is this country shrinking? So it's a very broad subject which is trying to explain many things, and as I said, it incorporates politics, mathematics to an extent. It also works well with sciences and engineering, because we're trying to explain what's happening in the world, trying to model the world, and it's often seen not as a hard science because it isn't a physics or chemistry, but it's often seen as harder than those subjects because we can't control what's happening in the world economy. There are so many variables. I read an article which said that economics is like physics or chemistry, but the particles can think. So if the particles can think, it's very hard to predict how they're going to behave. So that's why it's really difficult to predict accurately in economics. Having said that, it's a wonderful subject, and there is predictive power, as we said, from supply and demand, and people can make a lot of money out of economics if you predict which way the stock price is going to go, or which way the currency is going to go. Forex trading, for example, foreign exchange trading. There's a lot of money to be made using the tools from economics, if that's something that interests you. So and then business studies is more focused than sort of trying to explain the whole world and the sort of interaction between the different groups, as we said there. Business studies focuses on businesses, so it's looking at individual businesses and case studies and the different departments in a business. So what is the human resources department of a business? What does marketing do? What's customer service? What's finance? What's break-even analysis? What's accounting? What kind of strategy do businesses employ? So this is kind of a subset, because as I said in theme 3, we do business economics there, but obviously business studies goes into much more detail about how to start up a business, who particular entrepreneurs are, and looking at various examples like that. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the difference between economics and business studies. If there are any questions, I'm sure yeah, there'll be time for that and we can answer those.
Thank you so much, Ben. So segueing into this, these are some ideas of what you can do with an economics degree. And what Ben said is quite clear that you can combine economics with a whole range of financial, business, philosophy, politics courses. But the important thing that we advise you to do is make sure that you research your courses and your career paths very clearly as you start applying to university and start choosing your university courses. So in the next slide, you will see some typical entry requirements for some of the top universities. And if you look at the type of courses that you can do there, economics is often mixed up with politics, economics, management, and then mathematics is often included in as one of the compulsory subjects, not in all economics courses, but in quite a few of them. And if you're someone who's actually looking for a really, really high in university place, you have to keep in the back of your mind that the entry requirements for these universities specifically are usually minimum A star AA, with some of them including mathematics. So we always say at MPW, your personal tutors are also people who are specialized in helping you with university applications. So should you register with us and you're interested, we can actually connect you early with one of your personal tutors, and we can start looking already on this side of summer at your university applications and the types of tasks and reading and experience you need to build up to be able to do an excellent university application. So that's all from me. If you have now any questions subject related to Ben or any further UCAS application or university questions from me and Betty, please, we'll have some time for you to do that now. So we'll leave you some space.
Thank you so much, Ben and Susanna. What a very useful and insightful session. That was a great session, so thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions? We'll just wait a couple of moments. It doesn't look like we do. Very thorough presentation, Ben. Clearly. Yeah. So I think we can leave this here now, no questions. But as usual, if you do have any questions regarding this session or regarding Cambridge in general or MPW as a group, please do email us at international@mpw.ac.uk and we will get back to you. We will also send you this presentation. Oh, hi, Rebecca. We will also send you this presentation today, and the recording of this will be sent to you as well. But it is, again, if you do have questions, please do email us and we will get back to you. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you are all safe and well and continue to be so. Thank you so much, Ben. And thank you very much, Susanna, as well. Have a good rest of day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.